The girl used to be most afraid of snakes, slippery and cold. Yet she was now kissing and hugging the giant snake before her. Not because it had 8-pack abs and a narrow waist like a stud. With deep, mature, and considerate features. Unmatched in strength, loving only her. Nor was it because of its eerie, dual-pupiled eyes, but because it simply dotted on her too much. More honest snakes like this, please. Honest snake, don't cry too loudly later. Now, while being escorted, the girl looked at the fruit dropped by the big wolf in her hand, along with a few vegetable leaves, feeling somewhat like crying. Gritting her teeth, she took a bite of the fruit, bitter and astringent, with a hint of soreness, almost bringing Musasi to tears. But to have the strength to escape, she held back and didn't spit it out. Glancing at the few leaves in her hand, suddenly, a strange panel appeared in her mind. Identify the attributes and functions of this item. Host has 3 identification attempts remaining today. Only then did the girl remember. She had a system called the Ancient Survival Guide. With this, in the wild from now on, she wouldn't have to worry about eating something she shouldn't. But is now really the time to think about this? Right now, she needs to escape. Hello. If captured by these big wolves, to be traded for food, she might very well become a shared partner. Fortunately, the system also gifted her a 1 cubic meter storage space, although I still don't know how to expand the capacity. But as long as he thought in his heart, he could freely access items, wanting to put in a stone for backup. The scorching sun blazed. The convoy's pace noticeably slowed. He walked up to a slightly thinner male ORC, a pair of eyes brimming with tears. Big brother, I have an urgent need. Could you take me to relieve myself? That thin man looked Muses up and down, his gaze lingering a moment longer on her small face. He gave a look to the nearest thin man. Keep an eye on things for me first. I'll be right back. Muses nervously clenched her small fists, a flash of determination in her eyes. Gritting his teeth, he followed along. Not long after walking, the thin man saw that the people outside probably couldn't hear the commotion inside. He stopped and turned his gaze onto Musasi. Musasi nervously took a breath and gave the thin man a shy smile. Could you please turn around first? With you looking at me like this, how can I comfortably come out? Upon hearing this, the thin man showed no intention of turning around. A wicked smile played on his lips. Little female, what are you pretending for? Wasn't it you who deliberately lured me here? As he spoke, he raised his hand, wanting to touch Musasi's little face. His eyes were full of lecherous intent. Musasi, without showing any expression, avoided the beastman's touch, and said in a pitiful tone, so what if I lured you here? I was captivated by your extraordinary bravery, brother, but I'm about to be traded away, and won't get to see you anymore after that. Most beastmen aren't particularly clever, usually relying on brute force to solve problems. This thin man, being somewhat smaller than other thin men, had never been praised like this by a female before. For a moment, he was so pleased, he was a bit disoriented. His gaze towards Musasi softened somewhat. So you want to follow me and be my mate? Seeing that the thin man had taken the bait, Musasi immediately nodded shyly. Don't eat much. You're so capable. You'll definitely be able to provide for me. Can you not replace me? While saying this, he quietly approached this ORC. In the eyes of males, females are all delicate and lack combat power. Seeing Muses approach him, he arrogantly thought she was trying to seduce him. So he stood there brazenly, waiting for the little female to please him. He walked up to the ORC, enduring the discomfort in his heart, somewhat stiffly raised his small hand, and stroked from the ORC's chest all the way to his shoulder, coquettishly saying, "You're so tall. Can you squat down a bit?" The ORC was completely aroused by Muses. Hearing this, he didn't think much, and directly sat on the ground. Muses only glanced once, then quickly averted his gaze. His face also became burning hot, for no other reason than because this simple-minded ORC had already pitched a tall tent at this moment. Muses endured the disgust and slowly approached the ORC. His small hand stroked past the ORC's neck, just as the ORC narrowed his eyes, enjoying the service he thought would follow. He suddenly took out that stone from his space, without the slightest hesitation. Using all his strength, He smashed it toward the ORC's most vulnerable spot, the back of the head. With just a thud, that ORC's eyes suddenly widened, and the next moment, he fell straight down. Bright red blood also began to flow from the back of his head. Muses didn't dare to stay any longer. He did not check whether the ORC was alive or dead. At this moment, in order to survive, in order to live with dignity, he could no longer care about others' lives or deaths. He turned and quickly ran into the woods. From beginning to end, he never looked back. He dared not look back, afraid that if he did, he would see that thin man chasing right behind him. He now had only one thought: to run far, far away. To never be caught by these thin men again. Even if he had to live alone for a lifetime. Even if he became a savage, it didn't matter. Musasi didn't know how long he had been running. When he couldn't run anymore, he walked. And so he went on, alternating between walking and running, till his legs grew weak and he could go no further. Only then did he stop. He was exhausted and hungry. His feet were already covered in many blood blisters, but he dared not simply collapse. If he collapsed now, he would probably never get up again in this lifetime. He had managed to escape with great difficulty. He was unwilling to simply accept his fate like this. He didn't know how much longer he walked, when several fruit trees appeared before his eyes, bearing pale yellow fruits. They looked quite delicious. Musasi's eyes lit up. He reached out and picked one, silently reciting a praise in his heart. The next moment, a line of text appeared beside the fruit. Golden fruit, poisonous, not edible. Juice can repel insects, can mask scent. Seeing the words, not edible, Musisi instantly wilted, still picked a lot and put them in her own space. After all, they can repel insects, can mask odors. She might need them at night. Musisi clutched her stomach, which was already aching from hunger. Enduring the pain in her feet, she continued walking forward. After only a few steps, suddenly, she was hit by something black, about the size of a thumb. Picked one up with her head. After some thought, she still used it. Appraisal: black chestnut, non-toxic. Edible, no side effects. Although Muses had already guessed this should be edible, she was still overjoyed. Immediately put the fruit in her mouth, bit it open, and began eating the flesh inside. The flesh was sweet and fragrant, very similar to the chestnuts she had eaten before. Muses quickly ate many black chestnuts. When she was full, without much hesitation, picked up a branch from the ground, continued to beat the black chestnuts on the tree. She collected all the black chestnuts into her space. After finishing everything, Musisi then continued walking forward. Seeing that it was about to get dark, the jungle also began to echo with the cries of various beasts. Listening to the sounds, they didn't seem very far from her. Tears welled up in Musisi's eyes, but she gritted her teeth to keep from crying. She had nothing but herself now. She no longer had the capital to be delicate. Even if she cried with all her sorrow, no one will feel sorry or sympathize with him. It would only waste his own chance to survive. The sky grew darker and darker. Just when Musasi was feeling somewhat desperate, she saw a particularly large tree not far away. Under the tree was a dark, black hole, blocked by a large stone. It looked as if someone had deliberately placed it there. Musasi hesitated for a moment, but now there was no other choice for him. Fortunately, that stone did not completely cover the hole. Given his size, he could still bend down and slowly walk inside. The scene inside further confirmed Musasi's guess. This tree hollow clearly had an owner. He hesitated for a moment, but still walked over. When he discovered, the dust on the stone table was very thick, obviously untouched for a long time. He finally let out a sigh of relief. His whole body relaxed. But now was not the time for him to rest. After surveying the situation inside the tree hollow, he walked to the entrance of the hollow, took a look at the large stone blocking the entrance, still not feeling very reassured. I looked again, thought for a moment, then turned my gaze to the branches and vines, sat on the ground, and quickly, using the method of weaving fences I saw my grandfather use as a child, bound those branches with vines into the shape of a fence. He tried to pull hard on the fence, then added another circle of stones. After finding it was already quite sturdy, he finally let out a sigh of relief, but did not stop to rest. Instead, he took out those golden fruits he had brought back, picked two, split them open, and squeezed all the juice onto the fence. Only then did he finally feel somewhat reassured and stopped. As soon as he stopped, all the exhaustion and pain throughout his body erupted. Mu Sisi staggered, finally leaning on the stone table, and lay down on the pile of dry grass bed that someone had laid out. Even though he was already extremely tired, because of the pain in his body and the roars of the beasts outside, he couldn't fall asleep. Everything around was pitch black. Mu Sisi ultimately couldn't hold back and cried softly while biting his lip. Whenever he thought about his future situation, he felt unbearably miserable, not understanding why he had to endure all this. Yet he was grateful to the system, because he clearly knew that he had already died after falling off a cliff in modern times. It was the system that gave him a chance to live again. After crying for a while in grievance and sorrow, until he was too tired from crying, he drifted off into a daze and fell asleep. But before he had slept long, he was awakened by the commotion at the tree hole entrance. After clearly hearing the noise outside, Mu Sisi shuddered and immediately became fully awake. He slowly walked to the cave entrance, peering through a small gap in the fence to the outside. He saw a giant snake thicker than a water bucket, fighting with a ferocious eagle of similar size to it. Normally speaking, a snake should be no match for an eagle, but this snake was overpowering that eagle. The eagle tried to fly away several times, but failed. The moment Mu Sisi saw that giant snake, his scalp tingled with fear. What he feared most in this life were cold-blooded animals like snakes. Losing his footing, he almost fell to the ground. Steadying himself, he cheered himself up in his heart. That snake hadn't noticed him. He also smeared golden fruit juice at the cave entrance to conceal his scent. He probably wouldn't be discovered. Comforting himself like this, Mu Sisi mustered his courage and looked out again, only to find the fight outside had already ended, and he just happened to meet the giant snake's gaze. At this moment, he noticed the snake's two eyes were actually not the same color. One was dark green, the other was red. It looked somewhat eerie, but by now, Mu Sisi was utterly terrified. He stood there completely frozen, even forgetting to breathe. Just as he thought the giant snake might charge over and eat him, the snake shifted its gaze away, using its tail to coil around the large, already dead eagle on the ground. Quickly left this place. Just before leaving, still glanced back in his direction, scaring Mu Sisi, who had just relaxed, and let out a sigh of relief, almost to the point of fainting. After the giant snake left, he then began quickly packing his things. He had to leave here. He had no other choice. Now, he had been targeted by a giant snake. The reason it didn't eat him now was probably because the giant eagle was already enough. Quickly exited the tree hole and walked in the opposite direction of that snake. Yet he didn't notice that the giant snake, which had clearly already left, was now lying not far from him. Its two differently colored eyes were fixed on him without blinking, almost without a single blink, filled entirely with aggression in its gaze. Mu Sisi hadn't walked for long before starting to regret it, feeling that he should have left tomorrow instead. That giant snake already had such a large prey. It shouldn't for a while, and his foot hadn't healed yet. It actually started hurting again, but he was already out and had come this far. Going back was no longer an option. Fortunately, along the way, he caught two small silver fish by the river, although they couldn't be eaten. But after appraisal, their gallbladders could reduce inflammation, using a stone knife to extract the gall and apply it. After putting the rest into a space, he gritted his teeth and continued walking forward, hoping to quickly find another place to hide. I don't know if the heavens heard his prayer, or what happened. He actually really saw a cave. It's just that this cave was very strange. The cave entrance was extremely smooth. It looked as if it had been polished countless times. Mu Sisi poked his head in to take a look, listened carefully. He didn't hear any movement, so he gathered his courage and walked inside. Just as he reached the very back, his pupils constricted. He saw on the ground of the cave lay the corpse of a large eagle. It was precisely that large eagle that had fought with the giant snake back then. Mu Sisi only felt cold sweat break out on his back. He never expected that while trying to escape and hide from the giant snake, he had run into the giant snake's lair. At this moment, He finally understood why the cave entrance was so smooth. With such a large snake crawling back and forth, how could it not be smooth? He felt his legs go a bit weak, but didn't dare to stay. He turned around, wanting to run, but bumped into a hard embrace. Musashi was so frightened he let out a scream. He wanted to retreat, but was pulled by a pair of thick, powerful arms back into that embrace from just now. A pleasant, magnetic male voice came from above. "Ha! What are you afraid of?" Hearing these words, Musashi finally regained his senses, knowing he had bumped into a person. He felt a little better. He looked up at this person who was much taller than him, very tall and very strong. The muscles all over his body possess a terrifying explosive power. His facial features are distinct and deep, but that's not the point. The point is that he has two differently colored pupils. His gaze carries a hint of wildness. Musashi thought about the world setting, then looked again at the male beastman's pupils. Tears had already begun to gather in her eyes. Her lips trembled. Finally, she mustered up her courage and asked, "Are you the big snake from just now?" The male beastman, upon hearing her question, did not hesitate in the slightest, directly nodded and replied, "That's right. My name is Yi Shu. You can call me Xiu from now on." After Yi Shu finished speaking, he lowered his head and sniffed at Musashi's neck, squinted his eyes. A trace of intoxication appeared on his face. He continued, "You smell so good, little unclaimed female. From now on, you are mine." Upon hearing this, Musashi was so frightened she shivered. Tears in her eyes, she asked, "Can you let me go? I accidentally walked in here." Hearing this, Yi Shu frowned. A flash of madness crossed his eyes, quickly concealed it. He had no intention of letting her go. Instead, he held her even tighter, lowered his head and nuzzled against Musashi's neck. With a look of infatuation, he replied, "Once is an accident. Is twice also an accident? First, you entered my tree hollow. Now, you've entered my cave. It's clear you were meant to be my little female," he said, soothingly kissing Musashi. His eyes were somewhat red. He coaxed further, saying, "I will provide for you from now on. Don't worry, although I am a stray beastman, I am very strong. I will make sure you are well fed and protect your safety." After finishing, he looked Musashi up and down with some agitation, not missing a single spot. Only after thoroughly examining him from head to toe did he continue, "And all you need to do is follow me. Be my little female, and bear me a few litters of pups." Upon hearing Yi Shu's words, Musashi felt no joy whatsoever. Instead, he fearfully shrank back, yet couldn't budge the arm encircling him in the slightest. He never expected that just after escaping the wolf's den, he would fall into the snake's mouth. He was most afraid of snakes. Although Yi Shu was currently in human form, the mere thought of his beast form made him tremble all over with fear. Moreover, he had no desire at all to be someone else's female, let alone bear children for anyone. Yi Shu, however, was extremely happy at this moment. He never expected to be so fortunate as to find a lone little female. The little female was very beautiful, fragrant, and soft, looking utterly delectable at first glance. Although a bit thin and weak, with some nurturing that would be remedied, though he didn't understand how such a precious female could be wandering alone here, and in such a wretched state. But Yi Shu was in no mood to care about these things. He simply took it as a surprise gift from the beast god. In this world, beastmen like him, who possess characteristics different from other beastmen, are called ominous beastmen. They are driven out of their tribes and become wandering beastmen. They have no right to possess their own females. Yet he had picked up a little female. And this little female was so beautiful, so fragrant and soft. He couldn't bear to put her down. How could he not be surprised? Looking at the reaction of the little female in his arms, and thinking about the reputation of wandering beastmen, Yi Shu felt that the reason the little female was so afraid of him must be because he was a wandering beastman. Wandering beastmen, having no females of their own, find their mating seasons very difficult to endure. This leads to situations where they forcibly snatch females from tribes. The little females who are snatched away are often tormented until only half alive. So in the eyes of females, they are often seen as demon-like existences. Thinking of this, Yi Shu frowned. He glanced at the little female he had encircled in his arms. Little female, you don't need to be so afraid of me. I'm different from other wandering beastmen. I will raise you until adulthood. When you reach your mating season, I will mate with you and have offspring. You don't need to worry about me hurting you. Upon hearing these words, Musasi even forgot her fear. Her face instantly flushed red. He had never heard such explicit words before. What did it mean to mate with him and bear offspring? Wasn't it shameful to say such things out loud? Musasi knew that resisting now was probably useless. She thought that since this person wouldn't harm her for the time being, it would be better to pretend to agree first. She could wait for an opportunity to escape later. After making up her mind, she nodded lightly at Yi Shu. Seeing Musasi agree, Yi Shu's eyes were filled with delight. He couldn't help but pick her up and give her a few passionate kisses. Then, he simply carried her toward the innermost part of the cave. Musasi frowned, disgustedly wiping the places Yi Shu had kissed. But she didn't dare to voice any opposition, afraid of angering him and making him go wild and hurt her. It was the first time she had been held so intimately by someone of the opposite sex. Musasi's whole body felt somewhat stiff. Even when she was placed on the stone bed, she was still a bit dazed. Yi Shu didn't pay attention to Musasi's emotions. In his view, since Musasi had agreed to be his little female, she was now his mate. Things like kissing, hugging, and lifting her up were naturally all permissible. After settling Musasi, Yi Shu crouched down and took off Musasi's straw shoes. When his gaze fell on the wounds on the soles of her feet, his eyelids couldn't help but twitch. Little female, sit here for a moment. I'll go find some medicinal herbs for you. Musasi hesitated upon hearing this, looked at the injury on her foot, knew she couldn't delay any longer, pretended to take out a gallbladder from her clothes, poked a small hole in it, and began carefully applying the medicine herself. Seeing her like this, Yi Shu wanted to help, but was refused by Musasi. I'd better do it myself. You don't need to worry about me. There's only this much medicine left. If he were to waste it, he'd have nowhere to cry about it. Seeing Musasi's firm attitude, Yi Shu didn't insist any further. Seeing nothing wrong with how Musasi used the medicine, he turned and walked toward the large eagle on the ground. If it were before, he would probably have torn the large eagle into several pieces, rinsed it briefly, and eaten it directly. As a snake beastman, he only needed to eat his fill once, and could go without food for over 10 days, without starving to death. But now, he had a little female. Although he had never raised a little female before, he still knew that little females couldn't really eat raw food, and needed to eat 2 or 3 meals a day. Otherwise, they would grow weak, or even starve to death. After some thought, Yi Shu lifted the large eagle's corpse with one hand, and walked toward the cave entrance. Passing by Musasi, he said, I'm going to the cave entrance to handle the food. Call me if you need anything. Upon hearing this, Musasi's eyes flickered slightly, but in the end, she nodded. Her most important task now was to heal her foot injury first. Yi Shu currently had no intention of harming him. He wasn't in a hurry to run away immediately, either. Seeing Musasi's well-behaved appearance, Yi Shu felt a bit of an itch in his hands, but there was still proper business to attend to now, so he held himself back. Arriving at the cave entrance, Yi Shu began plucking the feathers of the large eagle. In the past, he would tear off the skin along with them, but that wouldn't do now. He had to make a bed for his little mate that could last through the winter. Winter was approaching soon for beastmen of his snake kind. Although they wouldn't directly hibernate without waking, they would still become sluggish and lazy. He had to hurry and seize the time before winter arrived to prepare enough food for his little mate to last the winter, as well as furs, firewood, and the like. After Musasi finished applying the medicine, and seeing that Yi Shu still hadn't returned, she thought for a moment and then moved closer to the inside of the stone bed. Before long, she fell asleep, leaning against the stone wall. By the time Yi Shu finished preparing the large marten meat and returned to the cave, he discovered that Musasi had already fallen asleep. His gaze towards her gradually softened. When he was still young, he had been directly cast out of the tribe. The reason he managed to survive was entirely because, as a snake-type beastman, one full meal could sustain him for a long time. And his mother would secretly bring him food whenever she had the chance. Later, as he gradually grew up, he could also catch small animals to eat by himself. He originally thought that life would slowly get better. But just when he was 10 years old, there was a dampness incident. From then on, his mother never appeared again. He was very lonely and also very sad. But the only thing he could do was listen to his mother's words. Live well. All these years, he has always been alone. Although he has gotten used to such a life, he still feels lonely. Now, looking at the sleeping Musashi, he finally had a feeling of home. He secretly swore in his heart that he must catch more prey for his little female. Whatever other females have, his little female must not lack a single thing. He did not disturb Musashi. Instead, from a simple wooden box, he took out a piece of animal hide and covered Musashi with it. Musashi was awakened by the aroma of roasted meat. He sniffed the air, suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. After looking at the surroundings, he remembered his current situation. Just as he was about to get up, he discovered the animal hide covering him. For some reason, Musashi suddenly felt a sting in his nose. How many years has it been? No one had covered him with a blanket for a long time. No one had cared for him for a long time. He never expected that after coming to this world, he would actually, from a beastman's body, feel this long-lost warmth. Musashi felt, as long as this ORC doesn't think about mating with him every day, giving birth and turning into beast form in front of him, he could actually try to climb on him less. Just as he moved to the edge of the stone bed, the keen-eared Yishu walked in, took a few steps to stand before him, and without a word picked him up. Didn't I tell you to call me if you needed anything? You really shouldn't be walking on that foot lately, he said while walking towards the cave entrance. Held in his arms, Musashi lowered her eyelashes, allowing all her current emotions to be carried by Yishu, pressing her lips together without uttering a sound. Yishu didn't mind, simply thinking the little female was shy, happily placing her on a rock to sit. The meat will be ready soon, just wait a bit. As he spoke, he took 2 red fruits from nearby and handed them to Musashi. Have these to tide you over first. They're very sweet. Musashi held the fruits in her hand, dazed, feeling somewhat at a loss. If Yishu were a bit harsher with him, he might actually feel more at ease. But Yishu was being too good to him, leaving him unsure how to face it. Seeing Musashi not eat, Yishu thought she was afraid the taste might be bad. Little female, go on and eat. I've tried this fruit. It's not poisonous. Musashi met Yishu's expectant gaze, pressed her lips together, and finally picked one up and took a bite. As the fruit flesh entered her mouth, a rich, sweet flavor instantly filled her mouth. Musashi was happy, squinting his eyes. He looked just like a little cat that had stolen something delicious. Adorably tight, Yishu watched Musashi like this, only feeling a bit hungry himself, hurriedly shifted his gaze away, hid by the fire, started carefully turning and roasting. Musashi, nibbling meat, did not notice Yishu's momentary abnormality, finished eating 2 egg-sized fruits in small bites, then turned his gaze to the meat Yishu was roasting. Hadn't eaten cooked food for several days. He was naturally craving it badly. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the ground not far away, covered with many feathers. Musashi was somewhat curious, so he took a couple more glances. Yishu felt the meat was about done roasting, so he picked up the branch, roasting the meat. Just as he turned his head, he noticed Musashi's gaze, glanced at those feathers. These are all the feathers from the one just caught. Wait until I gather more to stuff into the hide. When winter comes, you won't be cold. Musashi hadn't expected this beastman had actually already started considering winter matters for him. A sour, swelling feeling rose in his heart. Before he could fully dwell on this feeling, a piece of roasted meat appeared before his eyes. Then he heard Yishu say, still a bit hot. Your skin is delicate. Be careful. The meat was already right in front of him. Musashi, who had long been craving it, how could he care about anything else? He took a bite of what Yishu handed over, although only a little salt was added. For Mu Sisi now, it was already a rare delicacy. He finished that piece of meat in just a few bites. Then he stared eagerly at Yishu, clearly wanting more. Seeing Mu Sisi's little look, Yishu's heart melted from the cuteness. He chuckled softly and tore off another piece of the tenderest meat for Mu Sisi. Although being fed made Mu Sisi feel somewhat ashamed. Good food should not be wasted. For a bite to eat, he couldn't care about that anymore. He really was this hopeless. Yishu really liked this feeling of feeding his little magnet, finding it particularly rewarding. In just a few moments, Mu Sisi was full. Seeing Mu Sisi shake his head to refuse more, Yishu couldn't help but frown, thinking his little magnet had eaten too little. Somewhat disbelieving, he reached out and touched the little magnet's stomach, only stopping when he found it was indeed bulging. When Yishu reached toward him, Mu Sisi's whole body stiffened, thinking Yishu wanted to do something after feeding him. When he realized Yishu was only checking whether he was full, he sighed in relief, but also felt ashamed, thinking his own thoughts were very wrong. Now, with the slightest stir, he would suspect others of wanting to do something bad. Yishu had no idea what his little magnet was thinking about. Little magnet, I need to hang the remaining meat by the fire to dry for a while. I also need to go out and catch more prey before it gets dark, to make dried meat for you to eat during winter. Are you going back to the cave now? Mu Sisi, who had been planning to escape all along, heard these words and felt very uncomfortable inside, feeling like a scumbag woman deceiving an honest man. Because of her guilt, she didn't dare to look directly at Yishu. After gently shaking her head, I want to sit here for a while. Hearing this, Yishu showed no sign of opposition. Alright then, my scent is here. The nearby wild beasts won't dare to come close. You don't need to be afraid. Saying this, he glanced at the meat strips still roasting by the fire, added a few thick branches to the fire, and then moved Mu Sisi a little closer to the fire. And this meticulous care made Mu Sisi feel somewhat flustered and confused. In the end, she could only suppress the strange feeling in her heart and nodded. Yishu completely failed to notice that anything was off about Mu Sisi's emotions. He patted her soft head, lowered his head and kissed Mu Sisi on the face, and only then stood up, quickly disappearing from her sight. Only after Yishu had been gone for quite some time did Mu Sisi raise her hand to touch the spot where she had been kissed, lifting her eyes to stare at the place where Yishu had left. His gaze was somewhat complicated, thinking of Yishu's kindness towards her. Mu Sisi warned herself in her heart not to be fooled by sugar-coated bullets. This beastman only wants to mate with her, wants her to bear his children. That's why he is good to her. If it were just about having children, when faced with life and death, he might still hesitate somewhat. But what would be born from following this beastman? Is it a child or an egg? It's still unclear. Male beastmen remain in beast form until they are 3 years old. Just thinking about the image of herself surrounded by a bunch of little snakes, Mu Sisi shuddered in fright. Her determination to escape grew even stronger. Yishu had no idea that his little female was determined to run away. After killing a black bear, he headed back. When he was almost at the cave, he spotted a small white creature ahead. It looked only about the size of his palm. Upon reaching the cave, Yishu rushed over to Mu Sisi in a few steps. As if presenting a treasure, he held out the small creature in his hand to her. Little female, what I brought for you. This little thing actually looks quite like you. Soft and fluffy. I caught it to keep you company. Do you like it? After speaking, his two differently colored pupils just stared straight at Mu Sisi, as if waiting for her praise. Mu Sisi. He shifted his gaze to the little creature in Yishu's hands. His eyes immediately lit up. This little thing looked very similar to the rabbits he knew, but it was much prettier than a rabbit. Without any hesitation, he directly took it over. His eyes were filled with affection. Holding the little creature, he silently thought to himself. After appraising for a short while, a line of text appeared next to the little creature. Long-haired rat, edible. Feeds on beans. Gentle temperament. Can be kept as a pet. He stroked the long-haired rat, clearly very fond of it. Do you know what this little creature eats? Hearing this, Yishu said nonchalantly, "This little creature eats a kind of small black bean." Upon hearing this, Musasi, her eyes immediately lit up. "Can we eat those beans?" Yishu was amused by her reaction. He raised his hand and pinched Musasi's cheek. "You don't need to worry about food. You are my little female. I won't let you go hungry." Musasi felt somewhat embarrassed by Yishu calling her little female repeatedly. She turned her head to avoid Yishu's mischievous hand. "Don't call me little female from now on. I have a name. My name is Musasi." "Musasi, Sasi, ah." Yishu repeated Musasi's name several times. His voice was deep and magnetic, carrying a hint of ambiguity in his tone. Musasi didn't know why, even though she had been called by this name for 18 years. Hearing it from Yishu's mouth felt different. It gave him a tingling, numbing sensation. After calming his mind a bit, Musisi said to Yishu, "I want to get some of those beans back. Is that okay?" Yishu thought he wanted to get beans back to feed that little beast. Naturally, he had no objection. "Sure, when I go hunting tomorrow, I'll bring some back for you." Seeing that Musisi had no other questions, Yishu began to clean the black bear he had brought back. It didn't take long before a complete hide appeared before Musisi's eyes. "Sisi, this hide can be used to make you a winter fur skirt. It'll definitely be warm." As he spoke, he offered the black bear hide to Musisi. He said, "Feel it and see if it's comfortable. If you don't like it, I'll find another one for you tomorrow." Musisi looked at Yishu, who was eagerly presenting his treasure, and felt a slight flutter in her heart. But she quickly suppressed it. She was going to leave, and wanted to leave quickly. Otherwise, there simply wouldn't be enough time to prepare food for herself for the winter. She really wanted to say she had no use for this hide at all. But in the end, she held back. She reached out and touched it. It felt smooth and soft to the touch. The texture was excellent. She was somewhat reluctant to let go. Yishu smiled, then went to deal with the black bear meat. He had to process all this meat, and also prepare a pile of things for Musisi's winter. "Although I really want to kiss and hug my little female, and lift her high, but there's no time." Musisi looks at the busy Yishu, feeling somewhat unsettled in her heart. The feeling of being cared for and concerned about is too long overdue. He couldn't possibly be completely unmoved. But when she thinks about the reason why Yishu is so good to her, she finds it hard to accept again. She doesn't want to give birth to snake babies. Not at all. Her eyes flicker, finally becoming resolute, looking down at her own feet, hoping in her heart that they will heal quickly. She must leave this place. The sooner the better, because she realizes herself has actually started to develop some dependence on Yishu, even beginning to consider the feasibility of following Yishu. Yishu, unaware of his little magnetism, is currently thinking about how to escape. He is still happily thinking in his heart what things he should prepare for his little magnetism. Both of them have their own thoughts. As Yishu busies himself, the sky slowly darkens. Yishu goes out for a while. When he returns, the stone bowl in his hand already holds a small flame, illuminating the dark cave. Musasi carefully looks at the wick inside, and discovers it is a black, elongated object. It looks quite like thick wool, but not exactly. What is burning inside is something. This is firewire grass. It can absorb oil, and it doesn't burn through easily. It's soft and fluffy, and also very resilient. Upon hearing this, Musasi became even more interested. He wanted to try using this firewire grass to knit himself a set of underwear in the way one knits a sweater. Although covered by a leather skirt, he really didn't want to go commando anymore. Yishu saw that after Musasi got the firewire grass, he first fiddled with it for a while, then started sitting there grinning foolishly. So, feeling somewhat curious, he plopped down next to Musasi, so happy. "You really like this grass?" Upon hearing this, Musasi nodded affirmatively, a pair of bright eyes sparkling as he looked at Yishu. "Where does this firewire grass grow? I want a lot of it." Being looked at like this by Musasi, Yishu's heart couldn't help but race wildly. He touched his chest in confusion, not knowing what was wrong with him. "I feel like Musasi is especially beautiful this time." Musasi waited for a while, but didn't get Yishu's reply. So he thought, this thing must be very rare, and became somewhat disheartened. It's okay if there isn't any. You don't have to feel pressured to get some. Only then did Yishu snap back to reality. For some reason, seeing the light in the little female's eyes start to slowly dim, he felt anxious. He really wanted to keep that glimmer of light, and immediately replied that there was plenty. This thing has a very vigorous vitality. It grows a lot every year. I'll get it for you tomorrow. As much as you want. Musasi suddenly felt she might have been somewhat excessive. It hasn't been long at all. He's asking for beans and firevine grass again. Yishu also has to do many things for him during the day, but he has no way to give Yishu what he wants. A flicker of guilt passed through his eyes. He spoke with difficulty, saying, "Thank you. Yishu, this is all what I should do. Why are you thanking me? As a male, I should satisfy my partner's needs. Moreover, Sasi, you haven't made any excessive demands." Yishu strongly disagreed with Musasi's words. After speaking seriously, he then lifted the long-haired beast from Musasi's arms, pulled it out, and tossed it aside. Then he himself climbed onto the bed, reached out and pulled Musasi into his embrace, and lay down. Before Musasi could react, a piece of furry animal hide was draped over him. Before Musasi could respond, Yishu pulled him even closer into his embrace. "You're so soft, so fragrant and soft. I've been wanting to hold you all day. I couldn't even focus on hunting. Almost let that black bear get away." Yishu spoke from the heart, but he didn't know that these words, to Musasi, were undoubtedly blatant expressions of love. It's the kind of sweet talk that can make one's sense of shame explode. The first time sleeping in the same bed with someone of the opposite sex, and in such an intimate position, Musasi was already feeling a bit flustered and somewhat fearful. Yet, as if this person didn't think she was flustered enough, he actually whispered such words in her ear. Musasi's shy little face turned bright red. Not just her face. Even the tips of her ears were red. Yishu's eyesight was excellent even at night. He saw it at a glance. Musasi's ears turning bright red. His eyes darkened. His Adam's apple bobbed. Unable to hold back, he took one of Musasi's ears into his mouth. Yishu's sudden move startled Musasi, making her tremble. A tingling sensation immediately traveled from her ear to her brain. Musasi cried out in alarm and tried to pull away, but she was trapped in Yishu's embrace, with nowhere to retreat. And Yishu's gaze had already shifted down to her fair, delicate neck. His eyes grew increasingly dark and intense. He directly released her ear, changing his target, and gently bit her slender, fair neck. Musasi trembled from Yishu's actions, pushing hard against the person holding her. She urgently said, "Yishu, what are you doing? Don't." Her voice even carried a sob. Clearly terrified, Yishu, he was not a man who went back on his word. He said he would not bond with the little female before she reached adulthood. Then he absolutely would not. He was just momentarily captivated by the beauty before his eyes, and lost control for a moment, wanting to get closer to Musasi, but never expected her reaction to be so intense, leaving him momentarily at a loss. He hurriedly lifted his head away from Musasi's neck. Musasi's little face was now deathly pale, tears streaming down her face as if they cost nothing, plopping down one after another. Yet she gritted her teeth, not daring to cry out loud, as if afraid of provoking him. Seeing Musasi like this, Yishu felt both anxious and bewildered. Although he had never lived within the tribe, he still knew how the beastmen of this world interacted. Nowadays, beastmen had almost no concept of privacy. A single cave might even house several pairs of mates. At night, they would all take their females to make love. They would even compare the duration of their acts for excitement, with absolutely no reservations. So Yishu, who grew up in such an environment, could not understand why Musasi, who had already agreed to be his female, would still be afraid of him. This was just a slightly intimate gesture. He, who had been somewhat intoxicated moments ago, now felt only desolation, thinking that Musasi was looking down on him. Because of his identity as a rogue beastman, he slowly loosened his arms, holding Musasi, and raised his hand, wanting to wipe Musasi's tears, but clearly felt that momentary flinch of fear from him. Yi Shu felt a pang of sadness, but still gently wiped away Musasi's tears. He said, somewhat despondently, "Sisi, don't be afraid. I won't touch you, then." Yi Shu's heart was filled with bitterness, yet he felt not the slightest anger toward him. In his view, little females are delicate and precious. Being so afraid of getting close to him must be because they aren't familiar enough yet. Plus, his identity as a wandering beastman made it impossible for the little female to trust him immediately, as long as he treated Musasi well enough. Let Musasi know his strength. Musasi would surely grow to like him more and more. He couldn't rush. Musasi had no idea about Yishu's thoughts. He had genuinely been frightened just now, thinking Yishu wanted to bully him regardless. If Yishu really intended to force himself on him, he couldn't think of any way to escape. Just when he was starting to feel despair, Yishu stopped because of his rejection. When Yishu raised his hand, he thought he had angered him, thought he was going to hit him, never expecting Yishu would comfort him so gently, and even wipe his tears. Meeting Yishu's desolate gaze at that moment, Musasi suddenly felt a twinge of guilt, feeling more and more like a scumbag woman deceiving an honest person's feelings. But he had no other choice. He really wanted to tell Yishu the truth, saying he didn't want to be his partner, didn't want to lay eggs for him, but didn't dare to say it. He was afraid that after speaking out, Yishu would lose patience and directly bully him without any regard. If Yishu only wanted to be ordinary neighbors with him, he wouldn't be willing to deceive him like this either. But Yishu was solely focused on wanting to have babies with him. What else could he do? Those would be snake babies, after all. The more Musasi thought about it, the more wronged he felt, and the more heartbroken he became, secretly deciding to leave as soon as his foot was better. And during this time, to try his best not to freeload, sharing everything he knew and all the food he identified with Yishu. Looking at the fire thread grass he had been clutching in his hand, his eyes flickered, remembering that this person seemed to always have his big thing hanging out, running around everywhere. His face reddened a bit, hesitated for a moment, decided to weave a few pairs of shorts for Yishu, as a way to repay Yishu for taking care of him. Yishu watched Musasi trying hard to avoid him, felt very dejected, but didn't try to get closer again. Each preoccupied with their own thoughts. It wasn't long before Musasi could no longer resist sleepiness and fell asleep. Nowadays, the weather was gradually turning cooler, especially after nightfall. The temperature dropped sharply. Musasi felt somewhat cold in his sleep, instinctively moving closer to the heat source. Although Yishu was a snake beastman, in human form, he wasn't cold at all. His whole body was warm and cozy. Yishu sensed something leaning against him. He then opened his eyes in his sleep. What met his eyes was the sweetly sleeping face of the little female. A flicker of hesitation passed through his eyes. In the end, he followed his heart. Stealthily, he opened his embrace. The next moment, Musasi directly rolled in, filling the empty space in his arms. Yishu looked down at the person in his arms. The corners of his mouth lifted. He stealthily nuzzled against the top of Musasi's head. Then, content, he closed his eyes and quickly fell back into slumber. The next day, Musasi groggily opened her eyes. What appeared before her was the man's smoothly defined, powerful-looking pectoral muscles, and her own arm was wrapped around his waist. But that wasn't the most shameful part. The most shameful part was, she even had her leg thrown over his thigh, clutching onto him like an octopus, thinking about her actions last night, pushing him away when he tried to get close, and then looking at her current hypocritical behavior. Musasi just wanted to die. She was now completely awake, her face flushed crimson, her eyelashes trembled, secretly comforting herself in her heart. Yishu must still be asleep, as long as she moved fast enough. Without a sound, without a trace, no one would know about her truly embarrassing deed. But when she cautiously looked up, then directly met Yishu's seemingly smiling gaze, now, Musasi completely lost any wishful thinking, quickly bounced to the other side of the bed. Stammering, said Yishu, "Don't misunderstand. I just have bad sleeping posture. I didn't mean to take advantage of you." Yishu had already woken up. When sensing Musasi was about to wake, immediately withdrew his own arm that was holding the person, putting on an act that it was Musashi who made the first move. Of course, regardless of the reason, it indeed was Musashi who made the first move. This time, hearing Musashi's words, he was almost amused, boldly and directly sat up, said delightfully, "Sashi, what kind of talk is this? How is it taking advantage? I am your male. Every part of me, you can touch anywhere." Musashi was really convinced. This ancient beastman's way of speaking, really, is every sentence full of flirtatious talk. The problem is, the other says it so righteously, without the slightest bit of embarrassment, making him seem overly delicate. "Don't ask, just ask." And its anger, sullenly turned head to look at Yishu, just about to say something. Peripheral vision unintentionally caught a glimpse of a certain place. At first, he was still somewhat puzzled, after realizing what he had seen. His whole mind went blank. He looked up in shock at Yishu's innocent face, subconsciously shrank back. The expression on his face was quite difficult to conceal. Some were still out of the loop. Yishu lowered his head in confusion to look at himself, and then understood why Musashi had that expression. But could he be blamed for this? At this age of youthful vigor, such situations are perfectly normal. Having held Musashi for half the night, if he showed no reaction, would he even be a normal male beastman? In this world, when females choose a partner, they not only consider the partner's ability to hunt prey. Some bolder females even demand to inspect the goods. Yishu felt somewhat unsure. After all, his little female seemed quite different from females of other tribes. He didn't know how to interpret Musashi's current actions. Guiltily touching his nose, he said to Musashi, "This is a normal reaction for male beastmen. Sashi, don't be afraid." Upon hearing this, Musashi screamed internally. He had taken physiology classes, okay? Did he need him to explain? He swore. His current expression had nothing to do with that at all. He couldn't help but glance at Musashi again. His face had even paled a bit. Reasonably speaking, this the body structure a human should have. Alright, even if you are a beastman, you still carry the word human in your name, right? Is it scientific for you to look like this? Have you considered the feelings of your future partner? Musashi pursed his lips. In the end, he just nodded, indicating that he already knew. He was afraid that saying more would lead to more mistakes. It was better to speak less. Musashi turned her gaze away, wanting to put on her own straw sandals. Before she could reach her shoes, her foot was grasped by Yishu's scorching large hand. She instinctively shrank back, and saw Yishu frowning as he looked at the scabs on her foot. A hint of heartache in his eyes. Musashi uncomfortably tugged, trying to pull her foot back, but without success. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Yishu take out from somewhere 2 pieces of small animal fur and wrap them around Musashi's feet. "Use this to wrap them for now as a substitute. I know a type of tree whose inner bark can be used to make shoe soles. Wait until I bring it back to make you 2 pairs of shoes. Then you can wear them." Musashi watched Yishu's actions, listening to his words, her heart feeling sore and swollen. Yet she didn't say a word. Yishu didn't mind either. After wrapping Musashi's feet, he directly picked her up in his arms and walked toward the cave entrance. After settling her down, he then started to light a fire and roast meat. Musashi thought Yishu would use the most primitive method of drilling wood to make fire, but she discovered Yishu actually directly took out 2 black stones, struck them against some dry grass. A few collisions later, flames burst forth. Flint. Musashi's eyes lit up slightly. He thought he would have to drill wood to make fire, already prepared for his hands to blister. It didn't take long before Yishu had the meat roasted. Just like yesterday, he fed Muses first. After the meal, Yishu placed the long-haired beast into Muses' arms to keep him from getting bored. "Sashi, I'm going hunting now. When I return, I'll bring you fire thread, grass, and black beans. If anything happens, wait until I'm back to talk about it. Understood?" Musashi really wanted to go with Yishu, but after thinking about her own condition, she still nodded, indicating she understood. She then turned her gaze to the flint, looked at her own foot, and ultimately couldn't resist her curiosity. Carefully tiptoeing, she picked up the flint and began trying to make fire herself. Musasi, who succeeded in lighting a fire outdoors for the first time, was so excited she almost jumped up. Fortunately, she remembered her foot was injured and didn't act recklessly. Time passed quickly. Musasi had no idea. She just studied it a bit. Starting the fire went smoothly. Then she studied her own space. Half the day had already passed, and Yishu had returned. He saw Musasi was not at all in the position she was when he left. He couldn't help but frown deeply and strode directly toward Musasi. Hearing the commotion, Musasi turned around and saw Yishu's expression. He felt somewhat guilty, but this bit of guilt was completely dispelled by the thing hanging around Yishu's neck. Are those black beans inside Yishu's? Hearing this, Yishu did not reply. He crouched down and picked up Musasi's foot, untied the small beast, fur on her foot, looked carefully. After finding it hadn't gotten worse, his expression finally improved a little. Musasi was caught a bit off guard. Then she saw Yishu, while wrapping the small beast skin for her. Didn't I tell you not to walk on the ground? What if you get hurt again? Hearing this, Musasi was momentarily at a loss for words. Yishu was too good to her. No matter what, Yishu's purpose was for being good to her. She couldn't deny that Yishu was, in this world, so far, the person who had treated her the best. Even her grandfather, who had treated her the best before, wouldn't be like Yishu, putting her first in everything he did, attending to every detail, caring for her meticulously. Seeing Musasi lower her head and not speak, Yishu thought his tone had been too harsh just now, frightening the little female, and hurriedly explained, "Sasi, don't misunderstand. I'm not blaming you. I'm just worried about your foot injury." Saying this, he brought over that bag and placatingly placed it in front of Musasi, coaxing, "Sasi, look. I've already brought back everything you wanted. The thread grass needs to be sun-dried first before it can be used. These black beans can be fed directly to the little beast." Upon hearing this, Musasi instantly cast aside her previous thoughts. She immediately opened the animal skin bag, wanting to see what these black beans looked like, and whether they were edible at all. After appraisal, not only were they edible, they could also be ground into powder. Musasi was extremely happy. Just like that, for the entire afternoon, Yishu helped with a puzzled look in his eyes. Finally, a pile of cakes was made, poking them with a branch. After confirming they were cooked, she first picked up one and delivered it to Yishu's face, who had already swallowed his saliva for the nth time. He had long been waiting impatiently. As soon as Musasi brought the black bean cake before him, he eagerly took it over. Musasi was startled by his action. Before she could utter a word of caution about it being hot, she saw him not even frown, taking the black bean cake directly to his mouth, clearly not finding it hot to handle at all. He even mumbled that this round piece was too delicious. By the time the two finished their meal, the black beans Yishu brought back were nearly gone. Musasi had seen him these past couple of days, and he hadn't eaten much more than she had. Today was the first time she saw Yishu eat heartily. She was momentarily shocked by his appetite. Facing Musasi's, this expression made Yishu feel slightly uneasy, afraid that Musasi would dislike him for eating too much. He hurriedly explained, "Sasi, we snake beastmen do have a rather large appetite, but a full meal can keep you from being hungry for several days. So you really don't have to worry about me eating too much and not being able to support you." Of course, Yishu only thought the latter part in his heart. He didn't say it out loud. After hearing Yishu's explanation, Musasi remembered the habits of snakes. He just didn't expect that snake beastmen still retained their primitive habits. If that's the case, he asked curiously, "Do you hibernate and eat after winter comes?" Hearing this, Yishu nodded with amusement. "Of course, I need to eat. Beastmen retain some primitive habits, but there are still many differences from unintelligent beasts. I do become lazier after winter comes, but I won't sleep all the time. I still need to eat food every few days." Yishu's eyes shifted slightly, thinking of something. His gaze towards Musasi grew somewhat intense. Leaning close to her, he said, "Sasi, are you afraid that if I hibernate, I won't have time to accompany you?" "Don't worry, I promise you won't sleep." "I won't sleep. If I get sleepy, You just kiss me. I'll definitely wake up right away. How could Musasi have expected that Yishu would suddenly steer the conversation here? Blushing with shyness, she averted her gaze, not daring to look at Yishu's intense eyes. Lowering her head, her small hands nervously fidgeting with her animal skin skirt, she replied softly, "Don't talk nonsense. That's not what I meant at all." Watching his adorable little appearance, Yishu only felt his mouth go dry, really wanting to take a bite. He swallowed hard, his gaze carrying a hint of aggression. Leaning in close to Musasi's face, he said in a hoarse voice, "Sasi, let me kiss you, okay? I'll just kiss you. I won't do anything else." Hearing this, Musasi blushed even more, the redness spreading all the way to the tips of her ears. Her body trembled slightly, instinctively wanting to retreat, but Yishu's movements were much faster than hers. Before she could even move, Yishu had already pressed forward himself, firmly trapping her in his embrace. Musasi looked up in surprise, her small mouth slightly open, just about to speak. The next moment was blocked by a fiery and urgent kiss. Yishu's kiss was urgent and domineering, as if wanting to devour Musasi whole, swallow her into his belly. Extremely aggressive, Musasi, having lived this long before coming here, had never even held a member of the opposite sex's hand. Where had she ever been taken advantage of like this? This was her first kiss, and it was actually gone just like that. Musasi felt both shy and afraid for a moment, her little heart thumping wildly. But Yishu couldn't care about those things. He only felt that Musasi's little mouth was soft and sweet. A tingling sensation shot straight to his brain, making him unable to stop, only wanting more. And Musasi, being held and taken advantage of, had already sensed that something was wrong, scared to the point that her whole body stiffened, not daring to move a muscle, afraid that one careless move might anger Yishu, making him unleash his beastly nature and directly have his way with her. Yishu felt Musasi's stiffness, knowing that he had frightened her, loosened his grip slightly, reluctantly kissed her lips again, then slowly released her. She didn't need to look to know how disheveled he was now. His gaze towards Musasi was somewhat evasive. Knowing that he couldn't restrain himself for a moment might have made the little female fearful, so he took a slight step back and cautiously said, "Sasi, don't be afraid, I really am just being gentle." Saying this, he picked up the unfinished shoe from the ground. "I'll get to work first. Call me if you need anything." Musasi only felt her lips go numb. Her entire mouth was filled with the taste of this beastman. Surprisingly, there wasn't the intense feeling of rejection she had expected, but the desire to leave grew stronger and stronger. She had a premonition. If things continued like this, something very frightening might happen. Now, she not only distrusted Yishu. After what just happened, she had even begun to distrust herself. No one had ever treated her as well as Yishu did. She was afraid that if she couldn't hold back, she would be bewitched by Yishu. Then she might really end up becoming someone's little wife, giving birth to a litter of snake pups. That wasn't even the main point. The main point was whether she would even have the chance to give birth to snake pups. That itself was a serious question. Just thinking about Yishu's size was enough to scare her to death. When Musasi realized what she was thinking about, her face turned red, then pale. Pale, then red. She silently cursed herself in her heart, then looked up and said to Yishu, as if nothing was wrong, "All right. You go ahead and be busy." After hearing Musasi's reply, he happily went off to attend to his own matters. Musasi looked at the firethread grass Yishu had brought back. This firethread grass wasn't particularly long, so splicing it was a skilled task. Otherwise, it will all turn out to be little bumps. Fortunately, Musasi's handiwork has always been good. I used to love tinkering with these things when I was bored. It didn't take long to wind up a ball of yarn. He hesitated for a moment, and finally decided to knit a pair of shorts for Yishu first. No sooner said than done. Shorts don't require much yarn at all, nor do they take much time. By the time Yishu returned, Musasi had already finished half of it. This was just the awkward part, thinking of that day. His face felt a little warm just from seeing Musasi's face, while also estimating how much space he should leave for that part to be able to fit her. As soon as Yushu returned, he saw Musi. Her little face was flushed, looking delicate and adorable. Exceptionally tempting. His eyes darkened. He put down the things in his hands and came to stand before Musi. Only when he got closer did he see clearly what was in her hands. He had never seen such a thing before and felt curious. What new thing is Sisi researching this time? It wasn't until Yushu spoke that Musi realized Yushu had returned. Embarrassed, she hid the half-knitted shorts behind her back. "Don't ask, I'll tell you when I'm done." Hearing this, Yushu, though still somewhat curious, did not insist on asking further. After all, Musi would tell him sooner or later. He didn't mind waiting a little longer. 2 days have passed in the blink of an eye. Musisi had already put on the undergarments she had knitted herself. The clothing woven from fire thread grass, although not as soft as cotton garments, it wasn't far off. It's just a pity her time was limited. She didn't have enough time to knit larger pieces, and could only make some innerwear to wear. The shorts she knitted for Yushu had been ready for a while, but she had always been too embarrassed to give them to him. She always felt it was a bit strange to give such a thing to someone of the opposite sex. But now her foot was completely healed, and her time was also very tight. If she didn't leave soon, she worried she wouldn't be able to find a safe harbor to peacefully spend the winter. She also worried she wouldn't be able to find enough food. Although Yushu had plenty of food here, she felt it was not proper to pack it up and take it. Moreover, her storage space had been full these past few days. With her physical strength, she also couldn't carry heavy loads over long distances. Looking at Yushu, who was preparing to go out, a determined glint appeared in Musasi's eyes. Finally, she took out the shorts she had knitted for Yushu and handed them to him. "These are pants I made for you to wear." Hearing this, Yushu put down the animal skin bag in his hand, his eyes slightly brightening as he took the shorts from Musasi's hand. But after studying them for a long time, he still couldn't figure out how to wear them. Seeing this, Musasi suppressed her sense of shame and explained it to Yushu. Then he turned around and averted his gaze. Before long, Yushu had put on the shorts. Then he excitedly hopped in place a few times, looking at Musasi with excitement. "Sasi, your hands are truly clever. You can actually make such exquisite things. From now on when I run, my thighs won't get hit anymore." Upon hearing this, the corner of Musasi's mouth stiffened, silently cursing Yushu for saying whatever comes to mind. How was she supposed to respond to that? Right now, she just felt utterly ashamed. Her mind even conjured some images of hitting thighs. Musasi gave Yushu a slight glare. Blushing, she coquettishly chided, "Don't talk nonsense." Yushu had gotten a bit too excited just then. He forgot about Musasi's thin skin. After hearing her words, he guiltily rubbed his head, giggled foolishly twice, and replied, "Oh, got it. I'll be more careful next time." As he spoke, he cautiously glanced at Musasi. His eyes were sparkling, just like a child about to get candy. Then he cautiously asked, "Sasi, how did you think of giving me a festival gift token? Are you almost an adult?" Musasi was baffled by the questions. What festival gift token? What does that have to do with him becoming an adult? Did he misunderstand something? He was a bit confused. Now, seeing Musasi just staring at him blankly, without replying, Yushu thought Musasi was just shy, so he didn't press her to answer him. The smile on that face was exceptionally radiant. Just listen to him excitedly saying, "Sasi, don't worry. I will find the most beautiful and precious fur to give you as our token of betrothal. You wait for me, okay?" Saying this, he turned around and quickly ran off, holding the animal skin bag. Musasi stared blankly at Yushu disappearing before her eyes, only feeling that she had probably made a huge mistake, cursing herself inwardly. How could she not have thought that intimate clothing shouldn't be given to others casually? This principle has never changed since ancient times. How could she not have thought? Would there be such particular customs here? Well, now it's done. Flirt and then run away. Totally a scumbag woman's behavior. The moment she thought about how disappointed Yushu would be after returning to find she had run away, she felt a bit of heartache and guilt. But she did not ponder carefully where these emotions of hers came from. Guilt is one thing, but why the heartache? Finally, taking one last look at the place where she had lived for so many days. Although she felt somewhat reluctant, the moment she thought of Yushu's beastly actions, and the fact that staying would mean giving birth to snake offspring, she shuddered. In the end, not daring to think any further, she directly walked off in one direction without looking back. Musasi did not go in the direction she came from. She was afraid of encountering people from other tribes. But she did not know that her 2 days of walking alone in the jungle, the reason he hadn't encountered any danger, was not because he was lucky, but because he had moved from the territory of the wild wolf tribe directly into Yushu's territory. Hardly any wild beasts dared to come to this area, and the direction he was now walking was gradually leading him deeper into the jungle, where countless varieties of wild beasts were innumerable. It was simply not a place that a weak woman like him could set foot in. He didn't know how long he had walked. The sun was already directly overhead. Musasi felt somewhat thirsty and wanted to get some water to drink. Fortunately, he had been following the river, so he didn't need to search for water. From his space, he took out the bamboo tube he had taken from the tree hollow, quickly filled it with water, and began to drink. But before he could take more than a few sips, within Musasi's line of sight appeared 2 beasts with tusks. Those 2 beasts looked about as big as lions from a distance, but were very ugly. With protruding tusks, a pair of eyes containing a cold light, were just staring fixedly at Musasi. Musasi stood there dumbly, looking at these 2 beasts he had never seen or heard of before. Tears were already beginning to well up in his eyes, but he didn't dare to blink. He was afraid that if he blinked, these 2 beasts would pounce and then devour him. He looked left and right and found that aside from trees, there was simply nothing to use as cover. Can let it hide. Musasi is almost somewhat desperate, seeing those 2 beasts have already started slowly approaching it, obviously considering it their next delicious meal. Musasi has no way, can only risk it. Of course, it's impossible to fight the beasts hand to hand. The only choice he can make is to climb a tree. Dare not hesitate much. He directly chose the big tree closest to himself, quickly climbed up. Although climbing was somewhat difficult, but fortunately, before those 2 beasts ran up, climbed up, just sat on a thick branch. Those 2 beasts then also ran under the tree. He looked down at the base of the tree, discovering he had completely misjudged the size of these 2 beasts. These 2 beasts are much bigger than lions, especially those fangs exposed outside, flashing with the cold light. Just one look scared Musasi into trembling. Their noses twitched slightly, as if they smelled something delicious. Their eyes erupted with a bloodthirsty light, one in front, one behind. They then started ramming the big tree Musasi climbed. He originally thought these 2 beasts would leave on their own after a while. Never expected they would have this kind of move. Not paying attention, almost got knocked down. Hastily hugged the tree's branch tightly. But those 2 beasts are like they never tire, continuously ramming back and forth. Obviously, they are not planning to let him go. Musasi is truly desperate at this moment. With tears in her eyes, she looks at herself, at her arms, scraped and raw from clinging tightly to the tree trunk. The pain makes her want to just let go. But looking down at the 2 beasts below, baring their fangs, she endures the pain and holds on tighter. She doesn't want to die, and certainly doesn't want to be torn apart and eaten by 2 beasts. Just imagining that scene sends a chill down her spine. Cold sweat breaks out in layers on her body. Musasi begins to feel some regret, regretting that she underestimated the danger of this world, bitterly hating herself for being too young, too impulsive, originally thinking that with the system's help, she could find enough food and hide before winter, at least survive. Now, it seems she was too naive. This world is no longer the world it once was. Danger lurks everywhere. A single moment of carelessness could cost her life. If she could choose now, she would rather be Yushu's little wife than be eaten by beasts, no matter what Yushu's intentions are towards her. At least he treats her well now, and hasn't done anything to hurt her. Following Yushu, even if she really has to give birth to snake offspring probably wouldn't really harm their mother, right? If only she had suppressed the fear in her heart, she definitely wouldn't have ended up in this situation. And besides, could she really have done it? Spending a lifetime alone? Humans are social animals, after all. Would he really not feel lonely? Would he not break down? If he really had to choose someone to live on in this world together, could he ever meet anyone more suitable than Yishu? Anyone who would treat him better? The more Musasi thought about it, the more she felt that she had been blinded by lard at the time, single-mindedly thinking only about escaping, single-mindedly thinking only about not laying eggs for Yishu. Yet she had thrown all the dangers of this world completely to the back of her mind. Now, it was too late for regret. Suddenly, after another new round of impacts from the two beasts below, Musasi heard a cracking sound. Then the tree tilted to one side. Musasi screamed in fright, clutching that section of the tree trunk desperately, as if holding onto her last lifeline. She closed her eyes, not daring to look down again. She knew this tree wouldn't hold on much longer, and she had no means of resistance left. She could only wait for the tree to break and perish in the beast's mouths. Time passed bit by bit. Tears intermittently slid from the corners of Musasi's eyes. The beasts under the tree were still constantly ramming. With one final crack, the tree finally couldn't hold on any longer and toppled toward the ground. Musasi tightly shut her eyes, silently praying to all the gods to let her die directly from the fall. Although she wanted to live, I really don't want to be half dead. Even less willing to be bitten to death by wild beasts after falling. But the anticipated pain did not appear. Something suddenly tightly wrapped around my waist. Immediately after, Musasi heard the angry roars of those two beasts, and the hissing sound of another animal, very much like the sound of a snake flicking its tongue. Yishu instantly pierced through the two lions with his snake tail. The beastman swallowed hard with difficulty, feeling somewhat apprehensive in his heart, not knowing how he would endure Yishu's wrath. As soon as Yishu turned his head, he saw this look in Musasi's eyes. He shrank his large head back, got Musasi down from the tree. The next moment, he transformed back into his human form. Musasi remained completely stiff, letting Yishu handle her, but dared not raise her head to look at Yishu's expression. And Yishu scrutinized Musasi from head to toe. The more he looked, the deeper his frown became, his eyes flashing with a sense of defeat. He looked very sad. Heaven knows how scared he was just now when he see falling towards the ground along with the tree. How terrified he was. Even now, he still feels a lingering fear. If he had arrived just a little bit later, his little magnet might have been gone. Yishu's voice trembled slightly. Muttering, he said, "I'm sorry, Sasi, it's my fault. Only finding you now, causing you to suffer so much." Still waiting for Yishu's questioning, Musasi, upon hearing these words, she was completely stunned, even wondering if she was hearing things. She looked up at him in astonishment, finding no anger in his eyes, only heartache and self-blame. Musasi was truly a bit overwhelmed, not understanding why Yishu had this attitude. Could it be that he didn't mind her running away at all? Wasn't he angry in the slightest? Even if Yishu had a good temper and truly wasn't angry, then where did this self-blame come from? Musasi somewhat uneasily clenched her small fists, pursed her lips. Finally, unable to contain her curiosity, she asked, "Why are you saying sorry to me? Aren't you angry at all?" Hearing this, Yishu stiffened and put on a puzzled expression. "Why should I be angry? It was me who didn't make it clear to Sasi that this place shouldn't be come to. And it was me who failed to find Sasi in time, causing Sasi to suffer so much hardship and fright." After saying this, he cautiously glanced at Musasi and said almost pleadingly, "Sasi, please don't be angry with me. I promise such things won't happen again. I promise I will protect you from now on. Please don't leave me, okay?" Upon hearing Yishu's words, Musasi was completely stunned. She never expected Yishu to think this way. I never suspected for a moment that he was trying to run away. He even took all the blame and placed it upon himself. Musasi thought she should be happy. At least this way she wouldn't have to bear Yishu's wrath. But she wasn't. Instead, she felt a stifling heaviness in her heart, exceptionally uncomfortable. Yishu valued him too highly, yet placed his own position too lowly. This made him feel that he was utterly unworthy of Yishu's pure, unadulterated feelings. What's even more laughable is, he actually thought Yishu didn't understand love. That seeking a partner was just for having children. A sentiment like this, one that puts the other first no matter the time or circumstance, even if it isn't love, is already precious enough to surpass everything else. Musasi pressed her lips together. The more she thought, the more she felt she had been somewhat excessive. Tears then began to stream down. Just as Yishu was nervously about to offer comfort, Musasi threw herself directly into Yishu's arms. Sobbing, she said, "I'm sorry, Yishu. I won't run off recklessly anymore." For Yishu, being embraced like this for the first time, he joyfully pulled the person closer into his embrace. But when his gaze fell upon the abrasions on Musasi's body, he carefully loosened his hold a little, regardless of whether what Musasi was saying now was just to placate her. He chose to believe her words were true. He patted Musasi on the head. "It's okay. I'll go with you wherever you want to go in the future. Sasi, don't be afraid." Yishu carried Musasi back to the cave. He directly took out the piranha gallbladder stored in the cave and began to treat Musasi's wounds. As soon as the bile touched the wound, a cool sensation suppressed the stinging pain. When Yishu finished wiping his arm and was about to check his thigh, Musasi instinctively shrank back a little. But in the end, he did not stop Yishu's actions. Musasi's face also became burning hot, flushing all the way down to his neck. He himself was just 18 years old, a young cook who had never been in love. How could he withstand such closeness? Yishu wasn't doing too well either. Sitting before him was his little mate, looking utterly obedient and allowing him to take advantage, a sight that would stir impure thoughts in anyone. But he could only endure it, striving to keep his eyes fixed forward, gritting his teeth to stay clear-headed. By the time he finished applying medicine to all of Musasi's wounds, a fine layer of sweat had formed on Yishu's back. He did not rest, but turned and took out the neatly folded fire, fox, fur. This thing was too hard to find. I originally wanted to find it to give to you as a token for the festival, but it took too long and ended up causing you to get lost. Musasi fell in love with it at first sight. No woman would refuse such a piece of fur, especially in this kind of world where it's hard to see bright colors. As soon as Yishu saw Musasi's expression, he knew she liked it very much. Although it was within his expectations, only after it was truly confirmed did Yishu finally let out a sigh of relief. He stepped forward and grabbed Musasi's small hand, staring straight at Musasi. "Musasi, since we have already exchanged tokens of commitment, when will we become mates?" Musasi was delightedly stroking the fur, thinking about how to use this piece of fur to make beautiful clothes. Suddenly, she was grabbed by Yishu and asked such a question. Although Musasi had already resigned herself to her fate, the thought of immediately becoming mates with Yishu still made her somewhat afraid. It wasn't that she was afraid of Yishu himself, but because of what she had seen of Yishu that day, she was afraid her small frame couldn't withstand Yishu's exertions. Musasi's eyes flickered. She raised her head to look at Yishu, wearing a pitiful expression. "I'm not yet an adult." He stroked Musasi's tender, fair little face, a trace of infatuation in his eyes. He said, somewhat ingratiatingly, "We can first pray to the beast god," pledging to complete the mating ceremony. As he spoke, he tugged at Musasi's small hand, assuring her, "Sasi, don't worry, and swear to the beast god. Before you come of age, I absolutely will not mate with you. How about you become my partner first?" Musasi looked at Yishu, at an expression even more pitiful than her own. She simply felt it was a bit hard to watch, cursing Yishu in her heart for being shameless. A man over 2 meters tall, actually learning to act cute and coquettish like others, and pretending to be pitiful. Finally, after some thought, Yishu truly was the person who treated her best. Musasi ultimately nodded in agreement. The moment Yishu saw Musasi nod, his whole spirit lifted. The smile on his face never faded, and he cherished Musasi even more, afraid that if he slipped up even once, Musasi would go back on her word. When evening came, Yishu first, at a place over 20 meters from the cave, lit a relatively large fire. Then, in front of the fire, placed a processed wild beast. Finally, he brought Musashi before the fire, had Musashi kneel with him in front of the fire. Together, they prayed to the beast god, made a vow of eternal loyalty, and prayed for the beast god's blessing. The first thing Yishu did after bringing Musashi back to the cave was to throw out the 2 large stones on the stone bed. He was someone with a partner now. Although he couldn't really do anything, hugging and kissing should still be possible. The more Yishu thought about it, the happier he became. He couldn't help but laugh out loud, yet he didn't notice. Musashi looked at his indescribable expression. Late at night, Yishu, who wasn't very sleepy, gazed at the person sleeping soundly beside him, and felt restless all over. Unable to hold back, he simply turned over. What followed was content. Everyone dislikes seeing. Fortunately, I was keeping an eye on that dream. Yishu treated Musashi with a bit more caution, afraid that something might happen to him, that he might suffer even the slightest injury. But when it came time to take advantage, he would still take advantage, since becoming partners. Every night, Musashi was held by Yishu while sleeping. Yishu would occasionally take small liberties with him. At first, Musashi would feel a bit nervous and ashamed, but gradually, after realizing Yishu wouldn't do anything excessive, he set his mind at ease, quietly hypnotizing himself in his heart, thinking of Yishu as a big, playful dog frolicking around him. All problems were easily solved. Every time Yishu took advantage, he would feel uncomfortable for a while. Musashi couldn't understand what Yishu was even after, but the man simply never tired of it. Now, Musashi had decided to live together with Yishu in this world. So he began to implement some of his own ideas, because whenever Yishu was idle, he would pester her. Musashi found something for him to do. In the cave, black beans and firethread grass were plentiful, but other foods were truly scarce. They decided to go to the Beast World exchange ground, replace some other food. Before leaving, Musashi also made an eye mask for Yishu, to conceal Yishu's identity as a stray beastman. A day's journey. The exchanged items and beast hides were almost too much to carry. Just as Yishu was about to transform into his beast form to take Musashi home, he sensed someone watching them with ill intentions. Yishu's gaze turned cold. He reached out and pulled Musashi into his arms, his eyes coldly fixed on a certain direction. At that very moment, a sinister voice sounded from ahead. "Your ears are pretty sharp." As the voice faded, several beastmen emerged from the shadows. Musashi looked up and noticed that all these people had some peculiar features. There are human-shaped thin legs. They're human-bodied, grotesque and bizarre. This didn't require Yishu to explain to him. He already knew. These were probably the stray beastmen. Musashi looked up at Yishu, only feeling his own luck was really quite good. It was fortunate that he encountered Yishu back then. If he had encountered these people back then, he would probably have chosen to die on the spot immediately. Yishu lowered his head to look at Muses. Seeing him staring straight at himself, he thought he was scared, soothingly patted his head. When he looked up again at the people opposite, the warmth that was just in his eyes disappeared without a trace. Get lost if you don't want to die. 1. A tiger-headed, human-bodied beastman immediately laughed upon hearing this. Pointing at Yishu, he mocked. A one-eyed guy still dares to talk big. As he spoke, he shifted his gaze to Musashi. A trace of lewdness flashed in his eyes. A disabled beastman actually dares to bring a little female out alone. Isn't this just delivering companions to us brothers? The others burst into laughter. Big brother is right. Isn't this just delivering companions to us brothers? Yang Zhen am already starting to get a little excited. Musashi, hearing these filthy words, anger flushed his little face red. He turned his head away and hid further into Yishu's embrace. I really don't want to make eye contact with those lewd gazes anymore. This made him feel uncomfortable all over, even somewhat nauseating and disgusting. Yishu's face wasishin at this moment. A murderous aura emanated from the entire body. He sneered coldly at those few people. Since you're looking for death, then I'll grant you your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, heterically transformed into his beast form, he used his snake tail to send Musashi behind a large rock. Then he charged directly towards those few stray beastmen. He rushed over. Those few people didn't expect Yi Shu to be so tough. When they met Yi Shu's gaze, one person exclaimed in shock that he was actually an ominous beastman too. Another person was also startled. How shameless. He actually concealed his identity to go and deceive a little female. Why didn't I think of this idea? Yi Shu would absolutely not waste words on these beastmen who wanted to steal his little female. He wouldn't say any more nonsense. He went up and launched a fierce snake tail attack. Yi Shu's endurance was too strong. Although some time had passed, and they were all somewhat fatigued, the speed and agility of his attacks and gradually slowed down. But Yi Shu seemed to be tireless and actually fought with increasing ferocity. They gradually began to struggle, realizing they had probably kicked an iron plate this time. The ominous beastman known as Big Brother flashed a trace of fear in his eyes. Brother, we are all ominous beastmen. Why must we kill each other? Join us, and that little female. We can share her. How about it? Hearing this, Yi Shu was so angry he laughed. Already at death's door, and still coveting his mate. Truly commendable courage. He had no intention of wasting words on them, attacking more and more fiercely. Regarding the minor wounds on his own body, he paid them no mind at all, only wanting to quickly finish off these few men, so he could take Musashi home sooner. Very soon, a wolf-type beastman was struck in the head by Yi Shu and fell silent. The remaining few ominous beastmen, seeing this scene, were scared out of their wits. That Big Brother even urgently said, "Brother, consider us blind and ignorant. If you stop now, we brothers will leave immediately, and from now on, stay out of your way. How about it? Stop now." Yi Shu gave a cold laugh and said disdainfully, "I gave you a chance, but you insisted on seeking death. How could I not oblige you?" By the later stages of the fight, the men were begging for mercy repeatedly, yet Yi Shu showed no intention of holding back or sparing them until all of them had fallen to the ground and ceased to make a sound. Only then did Yi Shu revert to human form and turn to walk toward the place where Musashi was hiding. Before Yi Shu could reach the spot, Musashi, who had been watching the battle the whole time, rushed out. As soon as she reached Yi Shu's side, she began checking the wounds on his body. Looking over him, Yi Shu's body was covered in scratches, large and small, and there were even 2 bite marks. Musashi's nose stung, and she couldn't hold back tears of heartache. Sobbing softly, she said, "Yi Shu, does it hurt?" Yi Shu originally wore an indifferent expression, as if he couldn't feel any pain. And indeed, he didn't think these injuries were much. The recovery ability of beastmen was very strong. But when he realized Musashi was worried about him, his eyes flickered, and he immediately furrowed his brows, putting on a pained expression. "It hurts quite a bit, Sissy. Can you blow on it for me?" Musashi had always thought of Yi Shu as that kind of simple, straightforward man, without any cunning. How could she have imagined Yi Shu would play tricks with her? Hearing Yi Shu's words, her tears fell even more fiercely. Hurriedly, she took from her space several piranha gallbladders and wanted to apply medicine to Yi Shu. Yi Shu had only wanted Musashi to take the initiative to get closer to him. Seeing Musashi crying more and more bitterly, just got a bit flustered. He quickly stopped Musashi's next action, picked her up in one go. While comforting her, he said, "Sissy, don't cry. I'm not in pain at all. I was just teasing you." Musashi wouldn't believe that Yi Shu was really not in pain. Who in the world truly doesn't feel pain? At most, Yi Shu was just more tolerant. She insisted that Yi Shu put her down and demanded that Yi Shu apply medicine first. Although Yi Shu felt it was unnecessary, the feeling of being cared for and valued was truly wonderful. So he complied with Musashi's wish and stopped. Musashi pointed to a rock, telling Yi Shu to sit down. After Yi Shu cooperatively sat down, she quickly broke a piranha's gallbladder. Start carefully applying medicine to Yi Shu. As soon as it touched the wound, Yi Shu felt a cool sensation that covered up the original stinging pain. But that wasn't all. Musashi still remembered that Yi Shu had asked him to blow on it. So, without much thought, he directly pursed his little mouth and blew on the medicated area. thinking it might make Yishu feel better. Yishu never expected Musashi to make such a move. He only felt that although the blown area didn't hurt, it started to itch instead. He averted his gaze, telling himself not to look too much, not to think too much, but then, without paying attention to it, Musashi directly blew a breath onto his shoulder. That breath lightly swept past his neck and ear, leaving behind a ripple, making Yishu lose control. He shivered. Musashi was confused by Yishu's movement, thinking she had hurt him. She anxiously said, "Did I hurt you? I'm sorry. I'll be more careful later." As she spoke, she looked up and met Yishu's dark eyes. Musashi instinctively felt some danger. She couldn't help but take a step back. But as soon as she stepped back, Yishu pulled her into his arms. The next moment, a fiery kiss landed. Musashi was stunned by Yishu's action. When she felt something was wrong, she was completely flustered, not understanding why Yishu, who was fine just now, suddenly went into heat. Could it be that this medicine has some side effects? But that shouldn't be. If there were side effects, the system would definitely show it. But now was not the time for her to consider these things. Yishu was clearly losing control. His hands were starting to get restless. Musashi's mouth was blocked. She could only make muffled sounds. Her strength was completely no match for Yishu's. And because Yishu was injured, she didn't dare to struggle too much, afraid of touching Yishu's wounds. But if things continued like this, she was worried she would be devoured by Yishu right here. The first time being in the wild. Musashi felt embarrassed just thinking about it. She was a conservative girl. For 18 years, she hadn't even held a man's hand. She really couldn't handle this kind of stimulation. Fortunately, at that moment, a bird flew through the trees overhead, making a slight noise, which startled Yishu, who was already somewhat out of control. He released Musashi, her lips already somewhat red and swollen from the kiss. His eyes carried a trace of discomposure. Carefully, he withdrew his hand that had already slipped into her clothes. As he withdrew it, he deliberately or inadvertently stroked, clearly somewhat reluctant to part with that smooth, tender sensation. He swallowed hard with difficulty, hoarsely saying to Moose, "Don't provoke me. You're not in heat yet? We still can't." Musashi originally wanted to accuse Yishu of his improper behavior, but never expected that before she could even speak, Yishu instead turned the tables on her. She was stunned. "When did I provoke you? Don't turn the tables on me." Hearing this, Yishu, a flicker of guilt flashed in his eyes. But then he thought, if he admitted it was his own beastly desires he couldn't control, there might be a few more big rocks on the stone bed in the future. So he gritted his teeth, putting on an innocent expression. He shot a resentful glance at Musashi. That look was as if he were looking at a heartless scoundrel. Musashi was stunned by that glance. Watching it gave me goosebumps all over. Just about to speak, then heard Yishu say, See, why did you just blow on my sensitive spot? Wasn't that asking for it?" Yishu felt he wasn't entirely wrong to think so. Musashi, can a male's neck and ears be casually messed with like that? A normal male being teased like that by the little female he's been thinking about. Would it be normal to have no reaction at all? When did I? Musashi really wanted to say she didn't. But when her gaze fell on Yishu's shoulder, she remembered his change just now, and her own actions at that time. Her face instantly turned red. Stammering, she said, I didn't. I just wanted to blow on your wound. I didn't mean it like that." Yishu was amused by Musashi's anxious attempt to explain. He felt like laughing, cursing himself in his heart for being shameless, for bullying the innocent little female. But he had no intention of repenting at all. Instead, he put on a generous demeanor and said to Musashi, "No need to explain. It's okay, even if you did mean it. We are mates. Whatever you think is allowed. It's just that right now, mating would harm your body. Let's wait until later to talk about it." Musashi was completely bewildered, not understanding why. Clearly, she was the one who had been taken advantage of. But now, it seemed as if he was the desperate one, instinctively feeling something was off. But when she looked up and saw Yishu's honest appearance, she thought she might be overthinking it. Gritting her teeth, she lowered her head and said shamefully, "I understand. I'll be more careful in the future." But she didn't see the fleeting smile on Yushu's face. Not long after returning to the cave, a wandering beastman named Muir arrived, asking to be taken in. Beside him was his one-armed, unconscious older brother. After some explanation, it turned out the older brother lost his arm protecting his younger brother. After understanding what happened, Musashi also felt a bit of lingering fear. She glanced at Yushu and noticed his expression was indifferent. There was not a hint of sympathetic expression. Musashi thought about it for a moment, and then understood why Yushu was like this. For Yushu, the experiences of Muir and the others were just ordinary for wandering beastmen, and Yishu's own upbringing could only have been harder than that of these two brothers. Thinking of this, Musashi's gaze toward Yushu held a trace more of heartache, but she didn't know how to comfort him. Her eyes flickered. She hesitated for a moment, but in the end, only said with a smile, "Yushu, I'll make braised pork with carrots and black bean pancakes for you tonight. How about that?" Yushu had originally thought Musashi would go comfort Muir, the little beastman, but never expected Musashi to suddenly ask him this question. Somewhat puzzled, he turned to look at Musashi. When his gaze met hers, Yishu's heart suddenly skipped a beat. What kind of look was that? Musashi probably didn't even realize it herself. There was a light in her eyes as she looked at Yushu now, as if looking at something particularly beloved. What Yushu had received the most in the past were looks of disgust and fear. He had never been looked at with such an expression before. Even his mother, back then, only had pity and reluctance in her eyes when she looked at him, but never any feeling of fondness. This being the first time Yushu received such a look, he simply couldn't discern the meaning behind this gaze. All he knew was that being looked at like this by Musashi, the blood throughout his body began to boil. Musashi saw that Yushu was just staring blankly at him, yet not answering his question. She glared at Yushu. "If you don't answer, I'll assume you don't want to eat." Hearing this, Yushu snapped out of his daze from earlier. He chuckled foolishly. "I want to eat. It's been many days since I've had black bean cakes." "You're very loud," Musashi snorted coldly. She swept a light glance at Yushu. "Then why aren't you going to cut the meat?" "Alright, I'll go right now." Saying this, Yushu went to get the meat. After the meal was prepared, she first served Yushu a large bowl. Only after obtaining Yushu's agreement did she take 2 cakes and a bowl of stewed meat. "Let Muir have a taste. Remember to give your brother some meat broth." Muir took the food, tears glistening in his eyes. This was the first time someone other than his brother had given him food, and showed not the slightest disdain for his identity as a wandering beastman. In the end, he couldn't hold back and turned around. A tear plopped right into the bowl, yet he didn't dare cry out loud, afraid of affecting Musashi's mood. He took a small sip of the meat broth. An intense, rich fragrance instantly and overwhelmingly assaulted his taste buds. Muir could no longer contain his emotions. He directly cried out loud. The next moment, he knelt right before Musashi. "Sister, you must be the goddess sent by the beast god. I, Muir, swear to the beast god. From now on, my life is yours, sister." Musashi was somewhat bewildered by Muir's sudden action. After understanding his meaning, she found it rather amusing. He had merely given her a bowl of rice to eat, so why did it warrant Muir repaying with his life? But just as she was about to help Muir up, the long-lost system voice rang in her ears. "Congratulations to the host for obtaining Muir's faith points. 10 points successfully activated the system space upgrade panel. Upgraded space to 5 square meters. Obtained 20 grams of space spiritual spring daily. Upgraded the space spiritual spring." Musashi widened her eyes, both shocked and delighted. She had almost forgotten about this barely noticeable system. Yishu was the first to notice something off about Musashi. He completely ignored Muir, who was still kneeling there. Put down his rice bowl directly. "What's wrong? What are you thinking about?" Musashi was called by Yishu. Instantly snapped back to reality. His face was full of joyful expression. "You guys eat first. I still have something to confirm. I'll tell you later." After saying that, he directly turned around and went back into the inner cave, leaving Yishu and Muir looking at each other. Especially Muir. Once Musashi left, he looked at Yishu with some fear. How dare he eat the food on the table? After Yishu watched Musashi leave, he slightly frowned. Turning back, he met Muer's evasive eyes. No need to think to guess what this little guy was thinking. If it tells you to eat, then eat. After eating, clean up the bowls and chopsticks. Saying this, he drank the meat soup in his own bowl in one gulp. Picked up the unfinished meal of Musashi, directly chased after him, not feeling the slightest guilt about using child labor. In this world, there's no such thing as getting a free meal without working. Musashi walked to the stone bed. Just as he sat down, he couldn't wait. Opened the system space upgrade panel. You, what's wrong? What's the matter that made you not even eat? Yishu said while placing Musashi's rice bowl in front of him. Musashi had no mind to eat at this moment. He mysteriously glanced at the curtain leading to the kitchen. A glance at Yishu. My space just upgraded. It became more than twice as big as before. Yishu had known earlier that Musashi had a special space. He only thought Musashi was sent by the beast god, so it was normal to have such incomprehensible things. Yishu was originally feeling a bit distracted and restless due to Musashi's closeness and the warmth by his ear, but after clearly hearing Musashi's words, all those improper thoughts vanished. Your space can even upgrade. Upgrade. Musashi quickly covered Yishu's mouth and glared at him. Keep your voice down. There are still people outside. After saying this and waiting for Yishu to nod, she released her hand from covering his mouth. Just now, when Moore knelt down and said he would give his life to me, a voice told me it was because Moore developed faith in me, so it upgraded. After hearing Musashi's explanation, Yishu was even more shocked. His lips trembled slightly, but for a long time, he couldn't say a word. Musashi noticed Yishu's expression seemed off. He didn't look happy at all. She tugged at Yishu's clothes. Why aren't you happy at all? Isn't the space upgrading a good thing? Musashi hadn't finished speaking when Yishu directly pulled her into his embrace. Yishu, what's wrong? Musashi could clearly sense Yishu's unease. He really didn't understand some of it. Yishu pulled Musashi into his embrace, gently nuzzled the top of Musashi's head, said in a deep voice, I'm a little scared. Hearing this, Musashi looked up at Yishu, somewhat puzzled. Just then, she saw Yishu looking down at her with lowered eyes. His gaze held fear and detachment. His tightly pressed lips betrayed his nervousness. Being looked at like this by Yishu, Musashi felt both sour and pained in her heart. She raised her hand to stroke Yishu's somewhat tense, resolute face, softly asking, What are you afraid of? I'm afraid the beast god will take you away. I'm afraid of losing you. As he spoke, Yishu held Musa's even tighter. Almost pleading, he said, Stay with me always, okay? Stay with me forever, okay? No, Musashi. Those words just now. Yishu now only felt that Musashi was probably the beast god's messenger, sent to complete some task. Once it's done, she would be taken away by the beast god. Musashi was a bit stunned. After a moment's pause, she laughingly slapped Yishu's head. You big head. What strange things are you thinking about all day? We've already become mates under the witness of the beast god. How could I possibly be taken away by the beast god? Hearing this, Yishu relaxed a little. But he still wasn't entirely at ease. But we haven't made it yet. We can't be considered true partners. Upon hearing this, Musashi's eyelids twitched. Instinctively, she felt a sense of danger. The next moment, she heard Yishu continue to ask pitifully, You, when exactly will you go into heat? I really want you. Can I just first? No, Musashi didn't give Yishu a chance to finish his sentence at all. She shamefully and angrily covered Yishu's mouth with her hand. Her face flushed as she said, Don't even think about it. Nothing is allowed. Before Musashi stammered for a long time, unable to utter the words go into heat. In the end, she could only bluff by glaring at him and saying, Before that thing. Absolutely not allowed. Yishu wasn't angry at being rejected, just somewhat disappointed and dejected. He just wanted to claim Musashi as his own sooner, to mark her, to let her be imbued with his scent, so that any other beastman approaching would immediately know this was his little female. Musashi didn't dare to look at Yishu's expression at this moment. She realized she was becoming less and less resistant to Yishu, easily softening her heart. She was afraid that if her heart softened, she might agree to something terrifying. Although it was bound to happen sooner or later, she was still young. She was afraid. She wanted to be an ostrich for 2 more years. At the very least, she had to delay until this body matured. Looking at Yishu's physique, then thinking about his stamina and that thing, then thinking about herself. He was genuinely worried that this body wouldn't hold up. Rolling his eyes, he decided to use other matters first. To divert Yishu's attention, poking Yishu's chest. I haven't finished what I was saying earlier. Let go of me, I still have something to show you. Yishu held the fragrant and soft Musashi, not at all willing to let go. But he didn't dare to make Musashi angry. So in the end, he reluctantly released her. As soon as Musashi gained her freedom, she got up and went to the stone table, took a bamboo tube usually used for drinking water, and returned to Yishu's side. Then she said mysteriously, "Don't blink." As she spoke, she placed a finger over the mouth of the bamboo tube. The next moment, clear water flowed from Musashi's fingertip into the bamboo tube. Yishu watched Musashi's actions in amazement, finding it quite magical. But he didn't take the spiritual spring seriously, simply treating it as a performance by Musashi. After Musashi extracted the spiritual spring, she immediately chanted appraisal space in her mind. Spiritual spring, drinkable. Males consuming it can strengthen their bodies. Females can strengthen their bodies and enhance beauty. Promotes rapid growth in plants and animals. Note, each person should not consume more than 15 grams per day. Otherwise, bear the consequences yourself. Looking at the appraisal results of the spiritual spring, Musashi almost laughed out loud. This was truly a timely rain. With the spiritual spring, he wouldn't lack fertilizer for reclaiming land and farming. And this can also strengthen the body. Isn't this exactly what he needs? Musashi's eyes were filled with laughter. She said to Yishu, "This is good stuff. I'll explain it to you in a moment. You drink some first. See how it feels." Yishu took the bamboo tube, somewhat puzzled, looked at the clear water inside the bamboo tube, thinking, isn't this just ordinary water? What else could it feel like? But seeing Musashi's expectant expression, he had no choice but to tilt his head back and take a sip. While drinking, he was still thinking, what should he say later to make Musashi happy? But after the water entered his mouth and was swallowed, a cool sensation instantly spread throughout Yishu's entire body, making him, who had been listless all winter, suddenly feel invigorated, his mind clear and sharp. Yishu looked at the bamboo tube in his hand, with a face full of astonishment. "Sissy, what kind of water is this? After drinking it, I feel refreshed and clear-headed. I don't feel the slightest bit of laziness anymore." "Really?" Musashi was somewhat excited, her eyes full of joy. "This is spirit spring water that appeared after the space upgraded. It can strengthen the body, but the daily amount isn't much. For now, it's barely enough for the 2 of us." Musashi also drank some herself. Just as she was about to say something, she heard some movement in the kitchen. Listening carefully, it seemed like Muir was calling for his brother. Musashi and Yishu exchanged a glance. They walked out one after the other. Muir heard the footsteps. He turned around and immediately knelt down towards Musashi. "Goddess, sister, please save my brother." Musashi was just wanting to test the effect of the spirit spring. After preparing some medicinal soup, she dripped in some spirit spring water. After the medicinal soup was fed, Muir was surprised to discover Muyi's lip color had become somewhat rosier. Although his body was still somewhat feverish, his temperature had lowered a bit. Muir turned his head to look into Musashi's eyes. His own eyes became bright and shiny. He pursed his lips, hesitated for a moment. In the end, he did not say words of thanks again. Instead, he secretly swore an oath to the beast god in his heart, that in this life, he would be at Musashi's service. Musashi was observing Muyi's condition, when suddenly, the system's voice rang in her ears. "Ding! Congratulations, host, for obtaining 10 points of faith value from Muir. Current faith value, 20. Each person can contribute a maximum of 100 faith points to the host. After faith points are maxed out, the host will gain a loyal believer. Please continue your efforts, host." How did faith value increase again? Believer, are you out of your mind? She just needed to vent a bit. What do I need this thing for? As she spoke, she turned and tugged at Yishu, who hadn't spoken all this time. She said, somewhat coquettishly, Yishu, can we let them stay with us for a few days? Yishu had never been able to refuse Musasi's requests. Now, faced with such soft pleading, he only felt that all thigh-bones in his body had gone soft. Where could he still utter half a word of refusal? His Adam's apple bob. Whatever you say goes. Musasi was still somewhat naive about matters between men and women. Naturally, she didn't notice Yishu's unusual behavior. After receiving Yishu's affirmative answer, she breathed a sigh of relief. She turned and left directly to find the animal hide, leaving decisively. Without giving it another thought, Yishu, whose mouth had gone dry from the conversation, was just like a scumbag woman who runs off after achieving her goal. Yishu gave Musasi's retreating figure a resentful glance. He very much wanted to follow her and do something. But the moment he remembered having just been rejected, he instantly wilted. He turned his head to glance at Muir. Once your brother is a little better, you should leave quickly. Upon hearing these words, Moore shuddered all over. He was afraid of Yishu, but even so, he did not want to nod in agreement. He had already sworn to the beast god to follow Musisi. I will follow my sister for the rest of my life, so I cannot agree. Upon hearing these words, Yishu's eyes turned cold. An icy killing intent emanated from his entire body. Do you want to die? Being stared at by Yishu like this, Moore only felt his whole body turn cold. Cold sweat even began to break out on his back, but even so, he had no intention of backing down. Gritting his teeth, he replied, even if I die, I will follow my sister. Yishu was truly angered by this little brat. Just as he was about to scold him, he heard Musisi's footsteps. Yishu suppressed his anger, swallowing the words he was about to say. The next moment, he saw Musisi walk out holding a piece of animal hide. As soon as she came out, she felt the atmosphere seemed somewhat off. What's going on with you two? It's strange. Moore was just about to speak, but Yishu beat him to it. He directly took the animal hide from Musisi's hands, threw it to Moore, and smiled innocently at Musisi. It's nothing. He's worried about his brother. The animal hide has been given to him. Let's rest early. As he spoke, Yishu pulled Musisi inside. Just as they were about to enter the inner cave, he turned back and shot a warning glare at Moore. Moore, who was glared at, looked at this scene. He already had an idea in his heart. He could already see that Musisi was relatively soft-hearted, especially when facing him, young cub. He glanced at his still unconscious brother and felt that no matter what, he must stay. He wanted to try whether he could seize this opportunity to have a different future. Yishu had no idea that this attribute of his within the drama had already been exposed. And even less did he know that the little cub outside had already made up his mind to cling to Musisi. As soon as he brought Musisi back to the cave, he pulled at a corner of Musisi's clothes with a resentful look, feeling somewhat wrong. You, why are you being so nice to that pair of brothers? Musisi looked at Yishu like this. The corner of his mouth twitched. He just felt that Yishu was becoming more and more shameless these days. A man over 2 meters tall. Why was he acting like a resentful woman? It really hurt the eyes. Too embarrassing to look at. Yishu himself didn't feel it, but Musisi felt ashamed for him. Musisi reached out and tugged at Yishu's thick skin. Stop pretending to be pitiful. Speak properly if you have something to say. Seeing that this trick didn't work, Yishu immediately dropped the pitiful act. His eyes darkened. He pulled Musisi onto his lap to sit, lowered his head close to Musisi's ear. His voice, low and magnetic. Fine, I'll speak properly. Musisi never expected Yishu to launch a surprise attack. His ears instantly turned red. He only felt a tingling sensation shooting straight from the oracle. His whole body trembled slightly. He then wanted to distance himself from Yishu. However, his slender waist was firmly encircled by Yishu. There was simply nowhere to hide. Musasi glanced at Yishu somewhat nervously, blushing and stammering. Yishu, what are you doing? Speak properly. Don't be mischievous. How have I not been speaking properly, huh? Yishu let out a low laugh. A pair of heterochromatic pupils stared directly at Musashi. Appearing somewhat eerie, he raised his hand, pressed a finger against Musashi's pink lips. His gaze gradually darkened. He said, in a low voice, "How have I been mischievous? I haven't done anything at all so far. How can you wrong me like this?" Without giving Musashi any time to react, he directly lowered his head and quickly sealed those tempting red lips. Only when he felt Musashi was somewhat breathless did Yishu reluctantly raise his head. He chuckled softly. "This is what's called being mischievous. Understand now? Why, you bully." Musashi was truly stunned. He could barely speak coherently. He didn't understand. How did Yishu suddenly seem like he had opened up his Ren and Du meridians, suddenly become so smooth talking? Was this still the simple, honest beastman he thought he knew? This must be a case of becoming a spirit, right? Yishu paid no mind to Musashi's shock. He was never a pure and kind person to begin with. Afraid of scaring Musashi, he had been restraining himself enough these days. But if he kept holding back like this, he was afraid he would eventually develop internal injuries. Moreover, he really wanted Musashi to slowly get to know the real him, to accept the real him, not a fake beastman who had hidden his true nature. Yishu looked at Musashi's surprised and flustered expression, finding it utterly adorable and tempting. He pressed Musashi closer against himself. "This is just teasing. When Sashi goes into heat, I'll show her what real teasing is." What's going on? Has Yishu been body snatched? Please, someone come and shut his flirtatious mouth for me. Musashi screamed inwardly, her entire body flushed with shame, desperately wanting to get away from Yishu right this instant. Musashi had no choice but to raise her hand and cover Yishu's flirtatious mouth. She glared at him with little intimidation. "Don't say any more. If you keep acting like a rogue, I won't pay attention to you anymore."